Okay, like, we're right under it. Okay, there's no fucking slide.
When you suddenly realize you're on a Boeing 737-800 that does not come equipped with overwing slides, you're meant to slide down the flaps, but in this case, the flaps were up. My name's Juan Brown, you're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. Let's check it out. Yesterday, on March 13th, American's Flight 1006, a Boeing 737-800, suffered an engine fire after the aircraft was parked at the gate, resulting in an emergency evacuation of the aircraft. 178 people on board, and at the time of this recording, only 12 minor injuries. Each of these emergency evacuations reminds us all as passengers the importance of listening to the flight attendant's directions and reading and understanding the emergency evacuation card for the particular airplane that you're boarded on today. Let's take a quick look at this card for the 737-800 published by ASAI. We note the locations of all the emergency exits on the Boeing 737-800, including the 2 overwing exits, and check out the details here on the overwing exits. Once you get out on the wing, down here, step 5, you are to slide off of the trailing edge of the wing via the flaps. There are no overwing slides. Why? Because the Boeing 737 is a cheap airplane? Well, not exactly. Maybe that's partially the case, but also the 737 is a generally low-to-the-ground aircraft, and the flaps, the trailing edge of the flaps, are fairly close to the ground, as you can tell by the picture here, so you should be able to slide off of there without injury. But the flaps need to be down fully to 40. So let's look at this outdated QRC quick reaction checklist from Thomson Airways on the 737, and we can see on the evacuation checklist, the first step is flaps 40. So why the flaps weren't down at 40 is something investigators are going to need to determine, and they'll be able to figure that out after they interview the crew. And one of the first questions investigators are going to have is, was this a commanded evacuation commanded by the pilots up front, or an uncommanded evacuation where either the flight attendants or the passengers themselves simply started opening doors and evacuating the aircraft? The importance of a commanded evacuation by the captain versus an uncommanded evacuation by the crew in the back or the passengers themselves is just the very hazards that you see in this particular evacuation. You got to get all these steps done: the flap lever down, the park and brake set, outflow valves open, start getting the smoke out of there, and then shut the engines down, make sure the engines are shut down. Now you can safely evacuate the aircraft. If you just take it upon yourself to evacuate the aircraft, these steps may not be done prior to the evacuation. By the way, the other reason for this pressurization is to make sure that the cabin pressure is equalized with the outside air pressure so that all the doors open easily. So this whole event apparently happened to American's Flight 1006 after they were departing Colorado Springs, Colorado, en route to Dallas, Texas, when apparently, according to initial reports, the crew started getting engine vibrations from the number 2 engine, the CFM56 engine, and decided to divert back to Denver, where it's assumed there's better runways and better maintenance facilities to take care of the engine problem. Now, an engine vibration problem on a 737 is no big deal, and most of these jet aircraft, the procedure is basically the same. There's a engine vibration monitor on your engine display, and when that exceeds a certain limit, it'll get a yellow light and advise you of that. And so the basic procedure is to retard the throttle on that one engine that's vibrating too much until the vibration levels come back within tolerance, or if you bring the thing all the way back to idle and it's still vibrating too much, then you can shut the engine down. In this case, according to the ATC data, and you can listen to it over on Victor's channel, the crew elected to retard the throttle and the vibrations came within limits, and they just continue to operate on reduced power on that one engine. No big deal, no big emergency, but they decided to divert to Denver anyways, get the aircraft fixed. All of this engine fire problem didn't occur until well after the aircraft was stopped at the gate. So it looks like the crew landed uneventfully, no emergency, taxied to the gate, after landing checklist, retract the flaps, lower the spoilers or speed brakes. Everything's ops normal. They get to the gate and get ready to shut down the engine. Now suddenly there's a problem. And looking at this video and these pictures, it looks to me like it's a flammable fluid leaking out of the engine, possibly catching on fire from the engine itself or the hot brakes. Suddenly there's a fire in the number 2 engine at the gate. And in this picture, all these pictures come from social media, we can see that the aircraft was already hooked up to the gate, so presumably the flight attendants have probably already disarmed the doors, which means you're going to need to rearm the doors on the doors with slides before you open those doors to deploy the slides. And viewing this video from the Admiral's Lounge, check out which way that smoke is going. It's headed towards the rear of the aircraft. This puts the crew in a very tough position. Remember, there's no cameras on these aircraft for the crews to look at. The crews may very well be the last people to know what the heck is going on out there. Certainly the people in the back of the aircraft and the flight attendants are going to have a better idea of what's going on with that fire underneath that engine long before the crew does. Investigators will have to see, did the crew get any kind of fire indication from the engine? When this occurred, what was their first indication that there was a problem? This is where the situation can rapidly, this just happens so quickly that this situation can rapidly get out of hand and result in a uncommanded evacuation. The folks in back see what's going on long before the crew up in front realizes what's going on. Now with the jet bridge hooked up, it's easiest for most of the passengers to head up and out of the jet bridge hooked up to the aircraft. Presumably the one right door was not used because the jet bridge is right there and folks could just get off using the jet bridge. So it looks like passengers were able to safely evacuate out of the right rear door and slide, but investigators are going to need to find out how come the left rear door and slide were not deployed. It would be preferable to use the rear door on the left side of the aircraft because would put the passengers away from the smoke and fire. And pretty quickly, rampers and ground crew were able to assemble a bunch of air stairs and bring them up to the wing and get the folks off of the wing of the 737. 178 people evacuated at this time of this recording, 12 minor injuries. Now back to all our passengers out here on the wing when all this broke out. This puts the crew in a very tough spot. Are you now going to lower the flaps to allow these guys to get down? And of course, the checklist also says lower those speed brakes, which are located right there. You could easily injure a lot of people if you're going to start moving major hydraulic components around with passengers so close to them. It's the safer bet right now is to do exactly what this crew did and don't lower the flaps and just get them off the wing using the air stairs. This puts the crew in a very tough position. This is the awkwardness of this particular evacuation because of its location of when and where it happened at the gate. And investigators will again need to find out, was this a commanded or uncommanded evacuation, and how did all of this play out? These are the kind of tough split-second decisions you're going to have to make as an airline captain, and some days you earn all your pay in one short moment. There's really only 3 things an airline pilot wants as you reach retirement. 1 is to never have bent any metal. 2 is to never have been on the national news. And 3 is for the chief pilot to barely know your name as you slip out the door for that retirement. Examples like this just show you how quick things can change. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. Pay attention to your flight attendants and read those safety, briefing, and evacuation cards. See you here.
Okay, like, we're right under it. Okay, there's no can slide.
Thank you.
how do we get down?
Well, this is the first guy that done this.